This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with Yale men's head soccer coach, Kylie Stannard. He discusses the challenges for high achievers, both in an academic and athletic context, some of the key challenges he faced when moving into a losing programme and how he aimed to turn this around, as well as his experiences in high-performing cultures and what are the keys to prolonged success. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Kylie, first of all, thank you for bearing with me last week. I know we'd made a date in the diary and then I had to kind of, change that last minute. So I appreciate your flexibility with that. How are you? Are you all safe and well at the moment?
Yeah, no worries about last week, Michael, and really appreciate you having me on and excited to have the conversation with you today. And all good here. Things are moving in the right direction. And, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but the NCAA recruiting period just reopened for us a couple of days ago. So we're feeling like we're getting back to some normalcy here.
Yeah, I did see some of your social media, which was you, a thing with a person, their arms up, almost praying to the sky. I think, like you said, kind of doing the virtual recruitment or virtual world in general has been a long, hard slog for anyone. So I can imagine that for you guys being able to get back out and doing what you love is been great. So for people that don't necessarily know who you are, don't know your background, you just want to kind of go over obviously what your role is and what that entails, I guess, as an overall summary.
So I'm the head men's soccer coach here at Yale University, which is competes in the Ivy League, which is the oldest conference in the United States for collegiate athletics. Also in the Division I athletic setting, so the highest level here for amateur in the United States. And will be entering my 6th season, which would be my 7th season had it not been for the pandemic. But I started here in January of 2015. And, as you know, Michael, came into a program that was struggling quite a bit and had some rough years and had been able to bring us back to being nationally competitive. We won the Ivy League in our last season in the fall of 19, and we're ranked in the top 25 nationally that year. And, so I think have some really positive momentum. I think we have our challenges ahead of us to regain some of that momentum, just with the Ivy League not competing this past year, but excited for that. And, just kind of the quick path, on a, kind of shortened level before getting to Yale. I was the top assistant and then head or associate head coach at Michigan State University for 6 years prior to Yale, which competes in the Big Ten Conference. And prior to that, then at Northern Illinois University, which is just outside of Chicago. And that's kind of where I got my my college coaching feet wet and just building my experience, starting out as a volunteer, being elevated into the second assistant position. That's where I worked with one of your previous attendees on the podcast, Steve Simmons, who was my boss there. And then prior to that, I was kind of balancing both the normal, real world of working in a business, setting and then coaching at the club level and what's called Olympic development here. And then, kind of living more of a normal life, I would say. And that was then after my experience playing collegiate at Creighton University, also a Division I institution, and historically one of a top 20 program, and was fortunate enough to play on some really, really good teams there, a Final Four team, an Elite Eight team, ranked number 1 in the country for a couple of weeks. And but what I honestly always admit to everyone is, like, I was a very solid role player and Mr. Versatile on some really, really good teams with a lot of good players. Over 20 guys ended up playing pro that I played with during my time at Creighton. And I was the guy to plug into just about any position, and you know, with minutes here and there. But really enjoyed my experience at Creighton, and you know, that's kind of the quick snapshot, I guess, of my playing background. And you know, never played at the professional level, but certainly the highest level amateur here, and with a lot of guys that end up being professionals.
No, perfect. That's a really good overview, and obviously we'll dive into that a little bit more. I guess the first question and the easiest one is, how did having last season essentially wiped out because of COVID affect you guys, I guess, in terms of a practical setting, with a lot of your older players maybe missing out their senior years, etc., but also from a, I guess, developmental standpoint, a lot of the younger players that you're bringing into the program aren't going to get exposure to the type of work and development in terms of technique, etc., that you normally would be able to get into them. So how do you think that's affected you kind of on a practical level?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's no way of sugarcoating it necessarily. You know, it's been really hard on all of us, and especially those that would have been in their final year as seniors here. And you know, I feel for them, and of course all student athletes that went through that experience. Of course, there's many more bigger things in life as well when we're talking a global pandemic, but on the smaller scale as it relates to us, that was tough. I think one of the things that is probably most difficult is the work that we had done to get to where we were here at Yale, and kind of climbing the ladder of being, you know, one of the 5 worst teams in all of Division I men's soccer, to, you know, winning the Ivy League and being ranked in the top 25 is, to me, it wasn't a flash in a pan type of season. It was an accumulation of a lot of hard, diligent work with a lot of challenges to get there. And we had really great momentum. So we were returning 8 out of 11 starters. 5 out of 8 were all Ivy level players. So, you know, had really great seasons. We had a really strong returning group, along with a top 20 ranked recruiting class, including one of our top recruits who, you know, was an academy product of New York City FC, and then ended up signing a homegrown contract with New York City FC because, you know, he was going to be missing out on the collegiate experience this past year and losing that development. And so totally understand he decided to pursue that route. But that, you know, we had a really good group. The offensive Ivy League Player of the Year returning, to me, the best center back, the best goalkeeper, and so we were built for sustained success. And you know, now with the long break, we were one of only 2 conferences in the entire country, the Ivy League and the Big West Conference, that didn't compete at all this past year. So majority of conferences were able to at least compete this past spring. And so they're somewhat back into a routine, both with the relationship part, the team building, the team bonding, the cohesiveness on and off the field, and then certainly just the physical and physiological demands of the game, competing at that high level. So each of the Ivies had their own challenges with how their campuses de-densified and had certain classes on campus versus some that were not in the various semesters. So each Ivy has its own challenges, but in the end, like we'll go into this August. Hopefully things are looking positively for getting back into a fall season, but we'll have 3 classes that will have never hung out together, let alone played and competed together. And so that'll be over 20 guys that are in essence brand new in a lot of ways. And so the great thing is that the young men I have the pleasure of working with are innately motivated, driven, and very high work ethic young men. And so they're finding ways, those guys that we were able to work with here worked incredibly hard. And then those guys that weren't here found teams and other opportunities to train and play and maintain strength and conditioning. And and a lot of them are having to do that this summer even more, just so that we can come in and, as best as possible, hit the ground running and, try to regain that momentum that we had built.
And obviously, I'd imagine with the older ones leaving, you kind of seniors, etc., you're probably going to lose some corporate knowledge that maybe wasn't passed on to freshmen that traditionally it would be. Yeah. Obviously, you've got those seniors who are able to, architect this culture around them and say, well, this is the way that we like to play, or these are the standards we keep. So how have you gone around trying to keep that knowledge in the building, and how have you gone about trying to pass it on in a less traditional sense than you normally would?
Yeah, that's literally the $1 million question. I think that is something that my staff and I have talked about so many times, and really probably even the bigger challenge than the on the field part is the lack of our ability to further develop our culture and leadership. So a lot has been thrown on to what is our current junior class, that will be, elevated obviously this fall into senior roles. And then our current sophomore class, which has only played a season for us, that have all of a sudden will be elevated into junior, which are considered upperclassmen roles and oftentimes leadership roles. But they haven't had tangible time and work and evidence in the trenches to really build relationships and learn, in practical terms of, helping build leadership, maintain culture, and things of the sort. And so, like everyone, we've been in a virtual world. So I do think, comparatively to a lot of programs that I've talked with, I think we've probably done above and beyond with the number of individual player calls that we've had and team calls that we've had, and the work we've done, some tactical work and video work, but more so just from a team bonding, leadership standpoint, culture building. We've done a lot of that. We actually just went through an activity the past few months, really giving even more ownership to our players to try to mold our program into what they want it to look like. So certainly coaches were there to kind of help guide our leadership council or group that we have. But in essence, it's their voice, and they were the ones kind of meeting on their own and taking what they had learned from the older guys that had been through some of the the challenges and then the rise, to mold it into this new kind of vision and direction and everything. So in the end, we came up with kind of this new, I guess, pyramid and kind of program identity that we want to uphold and really put together by the players. So we're hoping that that's something that everyone can truly feel connected with and create that ownership to build on even further.
Was there any particular activities or tasks that were set to this group in order to kind of, I guess, sculpt these or formalize these? Or was there anything you particularly set that you had success with?
Yeah. So in essence, my non-negotiables for them, I just said, here's the thing. I want our program to be an elite program, that we want to be the best that we can be. That's the ambition, that we have, and that I want us to have you guys formulate this vision and identity with that end in mind. And then kind of the basics of that are just character, integrity, work ethic, kind of grit, and selflessness. And I guess like probably using some of our old words that I started with here at Yale, which is kind of a cheesy but effective acronym called CRISP. So CCRISP, and that stands for being confident with each other and ourselves as a team, being consistent, so really focused on the day in, day out process of just being your best every day and learning and moving forward. Relentless, which is that kind of edge and competitiveness that I want within our program. Intelligence, which, at Yale, we have really intelligent kids, but not just that. It's more about just being, intelligent in our decisions as a team on and off the field, and as a program and who we represent, and then also making good soccer decisions on the field as well too. Selfless, which again is such a key of any team performing at a high level, is everyone kind of checking their egos at the door and really focusing on team and family first. And then lastly, the P is for passionate. So really just having that pride in putting on the jersey, the Yale jersey, the Y, and representing what our program stands for, but understanding it's so much bigger of the guys that have played before, the athletic department and the university. So, playing with that kind of passion and pride. So that was kind of the foundation that I said, all right, you guys figure out how, with holding those fundamental values, what does it look like between there and being elite? And so that's what they kind of put together. And so that was the kind of, and then we just met on probably every couple of weeks just to discuss some of their thoughts and ideas, and coaches would ask some questions, and we'd have some dialogue about it. But it was really over a solid, 2.5 months that we were going through that process.
Cool. That's really interesting. I guess it links back to the start of your journey, which we'll get onto now. So something you alluded to earlier, that obviously Yale, when you very first came into the program, had a rough few seasons, a rough year, and not won a lot of games. So I guess the simplest question is, why did you take the job, or why did you want the job, or why did the job interest you to even begin with? Because you were at, I believe, Michigan State, and were in a quite a powerhouse program that was having a lot of success. So what drew you towards the vacancy?
Yeah, I think Yale is Yale. I think it's as simple as that. It's one of the most elite and prestigious academic institutions, not only in the United States, but in the entire world. It has a truly world brand name. You can get off the plane probably just about anywhere in the world, and most everyone is going to know what Yale is. And so that's, like, by itself just remarkable, and quite honestly a little overwhelming. And I'll be also the first to say, and I always joke with any players or staff or recruits or alumni, like, I probably couldn't have the transcripts or test scores to get into Yale. So everyone I work with is a heck of a lot smarter than me. But that's, being around people here at Yale is really motivating. And I think, and it just, whenever you're around, as you know, you're so defined by your environment. So when you're in an environment that is so high achieving, then it just motivates you that much more. And so, and I have great ambition. And I think the other part, Yale's Yale, but I also, it's so competitive and so challenging to to become a head coach at the Division I level, and really any level, but there's only 205, maybe 206 Division I programs in all of the United States. And so there are a lot of great coaches out there. And so I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity that I had here. And when it became a possibility, it was a no-brainer, even though I probably didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into, quite honestly. You know, you can research it and you can kind of, you know, see it from afar what it is, but you don't really know until you're in the thick of it. And I'll be honest also, it was probably surprising because I had, you know, looked into some other possibilities prior to Yale as well too. And, you know, what I would probably consider a quote unquote better fit in from a just an overall standpoint. But, you know, here we are, you know, I get the opportunity at Yale and you know, it's worked out pretty well. And, but I think it was a huge challenge that, you know, as you mentioned, coming from Michigan State, we were back-to-back Elite Eights. You know, we were the #3 overall seed in the tournament in 2014. And, you know, so going from a really consistent winning environment, and really everywhere I had been a consistent winner, to a program that needed a huge turnaround and a lot of work was incredibly hard, and more than I even thought was going, you know, what was going to be needed. But that being said, like, I think it allowed me to kind of just build it the way that I wanted, more than if I come into even a decent team, and certainly an elite team. It's like you can only make small tweaks and changes, and you don't want to make anything too drastic. Here it was, I certainly wasn't starting from scratch by any means, but, you know, it was more of a building job, you know, that I could put my stamp on it. And so I think that was the part of the draw for that. Now, what I will say is, like, you know, admittedly, I probably tried to change too much too early. And that's something that I really learned about. And, you know, that was probably one of the things that I would try to reevaluate and maybe make some changes if I had to do it over again in that way.
Okay, so
but I also think that's part of
let's talk through that process. So what I was about to say was, before, well, obviously you would have known that either the university was interested in you, or you put your application in and thought, actually, I'm getting to a stage where this might happen. What research did you do going into the vacancy, so you had an understanding of the environment, the culture, the athletics department, the roster, the other coaches, etc.? And then when you got in, what did you try and change early on? And maybe what went well, and what things would you actually reconsider looking back with hindsight?
Yeah, no, I think I did. I think it wasn't the easiest time to balance, you know, the research, because we were in the thick of the NCAA tournament at Michigan State at the time. So, and I was in charge of pretty much all video and scouting and, you know, a lot of the day-to-day stuff. So balancing that work with trying to, you know, look into this possibility and do the preparation and work necessary, was even more sleepless nights. But that being said, I think just a lot of phone calls with even the former head coach here at Yale, who you know, had been here for 19 years and obviously had a lot of institutional knowledge and knew the team inside and out. And he was transitioning into an administrative role, so he was still going to be around. So it wasn't like that didn't end necessarily on a bad note, but it was just, he admittedly knew it was time to move on as well. And so I used him and a couple of the other assistants that had used to work here just to learn more about it. I talked to most, if not all, of the other Ivy League head coaches just to kind of learn about it and hear what they had to say about Yale, and the pros and cons of that. Certainly ask questions among the administrators and some of the alumni that were involved in the process.
Was there anything in particular you were looking for? Was there any particular background you were trying to gain, or was it just a general perspective that you were?
I think a little bit of both. I think I definitely wanted to find out if this is a place that you could win, and be successful. And I looked at teams like the men's basketball, women's volleyball, men's lacrosse, the rowing team in particular. Those were competing at a really high level nationally. So I thought, and football was on the trajectory up as well too. So I saw those teams. Okay, you can do well here. It is possible. They're competing at a national level. Each sport has its challenges, of course, but so that was really important to me to see, okay, there are teams that are having success. This can be done. And then I think just learning about, the asking questions about the challenges that people would have, so that I could best educate myself of what I was getting myself into. Even though, as I mentioned, you don't truly know until you're in it. But I think the trying to figure out how extra demanding it is being a student athlete, as in an Ivy League institution, because while there are hundreds, if not thousands, of great universities out there, there still is something just different about an Ivy League institution. And the work and rigor that is required to be a student, let alone a student athlete here, is just more. It is more time demanding and with higher expectations than many and most places. So balancing being an elite student and an elite athlete with those demands is something I really wanted to try to find out more about. But the more I looked into it, it's like, okay, if you find the right people, then and your recruitment is good, then you can get it done. You can build the culture that you want to have that success.
Perfect. That makes complete sense. So in terms of when you've then got the role, so you've done all this research and you've gone, you know what, I think I can win. I think I can create the culture that I want to culture, and I think that I add value to them, because it's obviously a big one. You don't want to go in and feel like actually you add no value to the institution themselves. So you've gone into the role. What type of changes did you try and implement early on? And which of those maybe had success, and which of those do you think actually either I was wrong to try and bring them in as quickly as I did, or actually they had no place for being in the program?
Yeah. I think probably one of the big things that I underestimated is just the relationship part of coming into just a brand new setting. So I was so used to, I was primarily the recruiter wherever I was as an assistant coach. So you build those relationships with the young men and their families from the time they're, 16 years old through their entire career. So those are really solidified relationships, where with a lot of trust and a lot of investment into that, a lot of emotional investment. And I think it was hard for me. I didn't quite know how best to build those relationships with a brand new set of people. And I think that was one of the things I could have done a better job with and spent more time with, is getting to know the players that were on the team that I was coming into. And then also even more relationship building with their families as well, because while parents aren't super involved at the collegiate level. They certainly are much more than at, let's say, a professional level. And so there is still a balance of, they are entrusting coaches to, to lead their sons and to be good role models and to, try to do the right things, but, also be in a really competitive environment. So I think if in hindsight, I would probably try to do even more to build relationships and try to get to know the current players that I was coming into, as well as their families. And so that they could get to know me as well too. And because I think a lot of times, if things are coming from a player to, let's say, their parents, there's going to be a different message or perspective to it than what I might provide. And so I think providing that perspective to more people, I think, could have really, really helped. And I came in with, they didn't probably have, I think it was a little bit of like, I understood the rigors being more at a place like Yale. But again, I think it took me time to truly understand that. And so, I came in heavy with pretty much everything in the early mornings and, going from, they had pretty limited demands on them in the off season prior to me coming. And I came in with a lot of demands and trying to maximize whatever allowable hours that we were able to use with them. And I think that went from like very little to a lot. And that was probably a shock to their system. And I think anytime you have that huge amount of change, there can be some natural, uncertainty, resistance, and just, so I think that piece was a big thing. And so that could have been something where maybe I transition that a little bit more smoothly, and maybe it's not, trying to lessen time demand, but being a little bit more flexible with it, and maybe looking to schedule some things a little bit differently, and allow a little bit more flexibility that maybe isn't as normal at a place like Michigan State and many others, where you have just a little bit more control, I would say, in some ways. And so I had to learn how to adapt and be more flexible with the demands that they were having. And then the next thing I would say is like the young men and women here at Yale, and like institutions, like they often look to get job opportunities and internships and really high level stuff in the summer months. And that's a great thing, of course, but it can also inhibit, soccer, football development in those really important summer months, where the best programs out there, that's what the best players are doing. They're still finding competitive teams to train and play with throughout the summer. And, for those that don't know, our primary season here for Division I men's soccer is usually in the fall. So it's so important for our players to maintain their fitness and their playing and coming in as fit, healthy, and sharp as possible into August. Whereas in previous years at Yale, I think one of the big reasons where they struggled is the players weren't doing much soccer in the summer. They were focused on other things, jobs, and maybe they were doing some things on the side, but they were planning to come in and compete at a really high level in August without having done the work to be ready for that. And so I think just changing that mindset of, wanting to truly compete to become an elite Division I student athlete and then a program is something we really had to shift with the current guys, but really also sell to the guys that we wanted to bring into the program.
And was there anything you particularly had like success with, where straight away that the players went, yeah, I love it, I'm all in on that? Was there anything, any ideas that like?
Yeah, no, I think, here's the thing. The young men and women at Yale, they are high achievers, natural high achievers. So they don't want to have adversity. They don't want to fail. They certainly want to be successful. Conversely of that, though, is I think nobody loves, failure or adversity, of course, but I think a lot of times, though, many people at a place like Yale, they rarely, if ever, have failed much in their life. They often haven't come from much adversity in their daily life. They've always been, fairly intelligent, one of the best students in their classes, one of the best players on their respective teams, and probably in anything they've ever done. And so when they implant themselves at a place like Yale, all of a sudden, everyone else is like that, if not better. And so I think that can be a really tough transition for anyone that comes into a place like Yale, to realize how many incredibly talented and amazing people there are out there. But then you can struggle with that, because all of a sudden you don't see yourself as good as you were before. And so that's a learning process and part of just maturing. So I think, in kind of circling back to your initial question, though, is like, they do want to be successful. So they know that requires a lot of hard work and commitment and time and effort. And so I think the majority of the group was excited about some of the, like, hey, we want high ambition. We don't want to just talk about being okay. We want to talk about being great. And here's how we have to do it. And it is going to require more time and effort and commitment and discipline. And so I think the majority of the guys were excited about that, but they didn't realize maybe the how hard that was going to be. It's not something, as that you can just flip a switch and all of a sudden we're competing at a national level. And so it was truly it was like this initial excitement, and then this realization that, oh wow, this is going to take a while. Okay. And we're going to have to continue to struggle to get to where we want to be. And in the end, to me, that's what makes these past couple of years so much more special. And I try to share that with those guys that were here in the early days of the struggles, because they were a part of the success of recent years. They didn't, they don't get a championship ring, and they don't have that, experience, but I try to assure them, when I connect with them, they were 100% of the process to get there. And I really value that from them. And it was a learning experience for all of us. And, but to me, you have to go through some of that to get to where we are now and where we want to try to be.
And how long do you think it took for you to get the program to a place where you were happy with it, and you said, this is something that I think Yale could be proud of, but also me as a coach, kind of my identity, reflects what I want my team to look like?
Yeah. I think we started to see some glimpses of it in 2017. So what would have been my third season. And just, I think we had made some progress, even though we were still struggling for results off and on, but like, you could just start to see some things change in how many guys were playing in the summer at a competitive level. The commitment and buy-in to the off-season program. And so we started to see that. I think the big change probably came in the spring of 2018, when we had an opportunity to go on a foreign trip, which we're allowed one every 4 years in the NCAA. And we went to Italy. And not only was that amazing from, a soccer standpoint, but just from a cultural standpoint, from a team bonding standpoint, and just so educational in so many ways. And so we just started to build that cohesiveness and culture even more. Italy is, as you know, just the history of the country as a whole. And then of course the soccer, the food, everything is pretty remarkable there. So we gotta be in that environment and live that and grow closer together. And then little by little, we started winning some more games, even if they were exhibition games. Like at that time, we really needed to feel good about ourselves and to kind of feel a little bit of progress. And so we started to win some more games, and then that catapulted us into the fall of 18, which we ended up then having our first winning season. And then it was like, hey, we're getting there. We're almost over the hump. We're not quite there, but we're almost over the hump, and you can really see it. And then spring of 19, I would say one key game, we played University of New Hampshire, which is a really good program in Division I. They're consistently in the top 25. And it was a spring game, so it's an exhibition, but we dominated them that game. That was a legit performance. We played another team really close. And I think you really started to see, like, this team is starting to believe, and whenever I say that word now, by the way, I think of Ted Lasso, is the believe. And so, but you need that. And and then I think that certainly momentum drove us into the success of our fall season in 2019. And, that was technically the first year I had all of the guys I had recruited in. And so I think it was just one more page, it was one more chapter to move forward with. And so and again, I feel really good about where things are now, but we do have work to do and challenges to regain that momentum.
Okay, so linking back to something you mentioned earlier around obviously Yale being a high performing institution, doesn't matter if it's academic or sport. Yeah. Obviously, I guess this common phrase of being like the big fish in a little pond.
Yep.
Or being like a little fish in a big pond type of situation. Obviously, for you guys, with the success that you have as an institution and the level of expertise that you're going to have on site, pretty much most people coming into your situation are going to be little fishes in a very big pond.
Yeah.
How have you seen that positively and negatively affect individuals? So is there anything that you've seen that actually people get by going into that environment? These are some of the real key characteristics they're able to take away. And is there anything you've seen where people have kind of fallen away or really struggled with that environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. I would say that they are coming into an environment as a student where they are a small fish in a big pond, but from a Division I athletic experience, I would say it's more of a, big, they're a big fish in a smaller pond from a sports standpoint, because we aren't maybe in one of the top, 4 or 5 conferences in the country. And so, and we don't have, we don't have what's called like Power 5 football here. So it's like the football is a very big deal here, but not to the extent as some other universities. And so it's a little bit more well-rounded here and more balanced among the sports teams and athletes. So from an athletic standpoint, I would say a little bit more, we can sell the opportunity to really make an impact on a program. And I think a lot of the guys that we recruited here we're really excited about, hey, like there's a lot to say about taking, leading a program, being a part of something that you take, from a lower level and raise it to another higher level. Like that's just incredibly satisfying for anything in life. And I think even if you talk to your family and employers in the future, like you want someone like that as part of your team that wants to have the courage and bravery to take on something more. Like, hey, you're not going into a national championship. You're trying to build a national championship. And so I think that's really exciting for high achievers and motivating people, that they don't want to just follow suit. They want to truly be brave and lead and try something new. And so I'll say that on that side. From a student standpoint, though, yeah, absolutely. Like it can be overwhelming when you come from being one of the best in everything you've always done to being just like everyone, if not below average, or a Yale average to some. And so, I think like in so many aspects of life these days, and you even see it now with the Naomi Osaka situation and the pressures of today's world and social media and just spotlights. Mental health comes into things a lot, and I'd say that's prevalent even more so collectively across the world right now, but I think even more so for young people that are having to manage more attention and more things in their life than anyone's ever had to manage. So I think that can be that can hold a lot of extra pressures for young people that already have such high expectations of themselves and probably come from environments, whether it be their families or their peers or teachers and coaches that have these incredible expectations of them. So that's something that I think is becoming more prevalent, and luckily a lot of institutions, including Yale, are taking that to heart and really embracing trying to be that much more accessible and inclusive, supportive of young people in this environment. And so, because it is hard, I can't imagine if I were, an 18 to 22-year-old with in today's world. There's a lot going on. So I think that's something that we always have to remember as coaches, is like they have so many other things involved. So I think we as coaches have to truly be aware of that and make those connections and provide that understanding that and I think even something as simple as that goes a long ways, of just being able to listen to them and feel and understand that they are going through a lot and balancing a lot, and especially at a place like this that is that much more demanding. But I think I checked off a couple of questions there, Michael. Maybe didn't get to everything, but hopefully that answered most of it.
No, it does for sure. I think what's really interesting about your first answer around them building almost a legacy, that's almost like your entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. Which I imagine people from Yale, they're going to want to go in and be successful, and many of them might become entrepreneurs or start their own businesses or be a part of a successful business. And that's kind of a dream that you're selling them as part of the football program, to say, actually, you know what, you can be laying the foundations for us to go on and have success, and you can be one of those starters that gets us to the elite program. And it makes the players coming into your program realize they're part of something larger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with their teammates, they can be part of that, which is great. And I think linking back to what you said around the academic stuff, I think that's really interesting around the discussion points of just understanding that they have got a lot of pressures and identifying that we do understand that. And I guess the question I have off the back of it is, do you think it's a positive by them having kind of multiple avenues? So one thing I've spoken about quite a lot on this podcast is something I did my dissertation on, is the loss of an athletic identity. And I think that, you know, players, when they get to the end of their careers, when they have to retire or get injured, when they then have no other avenue, that's when problems can arise, because they've gone from being Mike Wright, the footballer, although I was never any good, Mike Wright, the footballer, to now, what am I? Because that's what anyone's ever known me as. Whereas the people that obviously you work with, there will be football players, but there might also be the chemist or the biologist or the English lit major. Do you think them having these multiple avenues that them can explore allows them to be better holistically?
Yeah, I do. And yeah, you're spot on with those challenges of, I was actually just reading something about LaMarcus Aldridge, you know, who was a former NBA player that had to stop playing this past year. And he was talking about his depression, because he just had to stop all of a sudden, and then he's without basketball for him. And you see that in every sport. And when someone has revolved their life and their identity around one thing, you see that more and more. And I think that's one of the great things. You know, Yale loves people that are very curious about a lot of things and have a lot of different interests. So you'll see a lot of people, particularly at Yale, that, you know, that maybe played some other sports or play an instrument, and, you know, or into the arts, or a variety of other things, or, you know, they spend a lot of time with community outreach and things like that. So multiple avenues to create a bit more wholesomeness and more well-rounded, so that maybe you don't have that as much. But, you know, I guess that's a very big positive. But I think also probably one of the challenges that we have here at Yale and like institutions is, you know, if all of a sudden someone decides, well, hey, I'm more interested in, you know, focusing on research or music or art, or, you know, just getting into a profession, because we'll have people, you know, that are already starting out with startups here at Yale, and you know, are coding and doing their own work on things. Well, all of a sudden it's like soccer then becomes like on the exterior, and they're already having all these other things, and your time and energy can only be spent so far, and you're only going to be so good and so productive when you have so much stuff going on. So one of the things that challenges we have is, like, if soccer continues to get more on the exterior of the priority list, then all of a sudden that player is not going to be, you know, as good of a soccer player. Thus, we're not going to have as good of a soccer team and program. So that's a really tricky balance that we have to try to create here, and you know, without losing them completely. A lot of that starts in the recruitment process, though, and really trying to see where kids' passion and love and interest is. And certainly we want kids that are, you know, curious and into a lot of things, but we really want them to love the game and love training and love the pursuit of elevating a program and creating their own legacy here. Because that's a really special thing, like you said. And so that's our ambition. And you know, our men's lacrosse program here, for example, has become, you know, an elite program, and you know, I can't imagine the challenges, you know, they've been on, because they're top. You know, I feel like we have to regain momentum, but they were, you know, back-to-back national championship games, ranked #1 in the country when the pandemic hit. And but that being said, they've been this barometer for me to be like, hey, like that's the goal. That's where we want to go. And we want to try to keep working to find kids that want that, you know, that aspiration. And because initially it was like, hey, we want to become Ivy League champs and a top 25 program. Well, we've done that. We want to keep doing that, but we also want to strive to be an elite. We want to win a national championship. So I think that's I kind of got off track there a little bit with that, but hopefully that answered some of the early part.
No, for sure. And I guess a question off the back of that, for an individual or individuals that have done that well, so have got, been able to balance the academic pressure or the social pressure as well as the football side. Is there any common threads in terms of characteristics or skill set that allowed them to do that?
I think, first of all, they have to be incredibly disciplined with their time, because there is so much time and energy and emotion put into all those different things. You have to be able, and you can only expend so much in each category. I think you have to be really good at managing your time, even more so than your average person, with all that you want to achieve and do. And so discipline with their time for sure. And I think being able to deal with and move on from challenge and failure, and not dwell on that, and just keep moving forward. Learn from it, evaluate, learn, and then move forward. And I think those that are able to do that end up finding, being able to grow and develop and find success. And because if all of a sudden you're not playing as much as you want, or you're struggling in school, it's easy to kind of drop something off to refocus and on that. And so I think that, discipline and ability to deal with adversity and changes.
And I guess looking, more at yourself now, obviously, as we mentioned a lot during this, Yale, very high performance. Is there anything that you've learned either about yourself or that challenged the way that you had thought previously or the way that you work by coming to Yale and maybe stealing ideas from either other coaches or other professions or other parts of the institution? Is there anything that you particularly picked up on and gone, actually, yeah, that's a really good way for them to try and challenge you as an individual?
Yeah, I think I definitely have been better and learned to ask more questions and to listen even more. And I think it is always different when you come into a setting that does need a lot of change. Listening is very important. There's no question in asking questions, but it's probably a little bit more, you have to take a little bit more of a stronger leadership role early on to create kind of the foundation and kind of core values that you want to institute within the program. But I think now that we have been through some of those challenges and learned from a lot of that, we're in a better place. I'm in a better place to now just lean on a lot of other people more, and have built probably more and more trust with my assistant coaches and staff around me. And I think just more patience as well. I think the older I've been able to get, because everyone wants a lot of success now, but there are so many things that go into to everything in a program, in an athletic department, in a university. Sometimes it can be extra challenging because every place has their own policies and procedures, and you have to go through certain things, and you can do this, but you can't do that. And so I think just being able to adapt and go with the flow better than I used to be able to do, and redirect focus and energy on kind of the battles that focusing on the battles that I think are worthy of the time and effort and energy, and maybe not necessarily giving up on certain things, but just refocusing. So I would say asking more questions, being more patient, and learning how to fight the battles that are worth fighting.
And do you get a lot of CPD opportunities with where you are? And if you do, what do those look like? Like, where do you go and explore? And is there any particular highlight that you've had, if you are able to?
Yeah, that's something I really want to do more of. I would say nothing really formal in recent years. Like I took, I have my A license through the United States Soccer Federation, but there's no like program necessarily within for like coaches at Yale. Certainly that's something that we can use our budget to do if we would like to. But I mean, I have ambitions to try to do like my UEFA B at some point. But that said, like, I mean, we're information is out there, so prevalently these days, is like definitely reading books, articles, podcasts. I'm constantly trying to listen and learn and talk with other coaches, whether they be at Yale or through other, colleagues and everything. So I do a lot of that stuff, just not as much in a formal setting. What I will say is Yale has a great like education and kind of career programming here for the university for any employee. So I've done some of those courses in the past, which are really helpful, and unfortunately, just haven't been able to do it with the pandemic. But I think that, so less so on a formal standpoint, but also always value learning and listening.
Perfect. And then kind of linking back to your time at MSU, obviously got an opportunity to work alongside. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I don't want to butcher it. So I don't know if you want to jump in and say exactly how it's pronounced. But
for Damon,
yeah,
Damon Rensing.
Perfect. So yeah. I guess what did you learn working under him? And then I guess a key consideration with them being so successful over such a sustained period of time, is there anything that you're able to put your finger on and say, actually, that's how you maintain high performance over a long period of time? Those are the values you have to have, or these are the attributes you need to, provide on a day-to-day basis to allow you to be successful over a sustained period?
Yeah. I think, and it's probably, it's certainly no secret, but I think everything revolves around relationships, and especially in this day and age where it's, you have fewer and fewer kind of top-down models, whether it be in work or sport or really anything. And so probably the biggest thing I learned working for Damon is just the importance of relationships and managing up, managing down, managing all around the different people that are all involved within running a program. And because people don't realize there's so many people that are involved within an athletic department that have their hands on helping assist and support the various programs. And so having close relationships and helpful, supportive relationships with those people, like if you have a positive relationship with them, they're certainly going to be much more liable to help, or want to help, and want to have ownership and feel a part of the program. And so I think that's something I really learned with Damon. And the thing is, it can't always be your way. You have to be able to be flexible with just a much broader scope, and within various policies and procedures and personalities of people. And so I think the more relationship and time that you spend building those relationships, more people are going to want to help to be a part of that and try to go above and beyond. So I think, but I also don't think most people realize how much time and energy that requires to have those relationships and have meaningful relationships, not just surface related stuff. And so I think that's the big part of that. And then just truly showing care and compassion, really for everyone, but of course within your program, for your coaches that you work with, and and then the players and their families. And I think that's something special that Michigan State has had for a long time. And then Damon, continued that and grew it. And so I think, I'm sure you've heard the quote that nobody knows how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that was, kind of something that was just not said by Damon, but that's just how he led and managed people. And so, he truly cared about those. And, but then also I would say there's always this competitive edge. So there's this compassionate side, but this competitive edge that had a certain standard that you couldn't go below, and so Damon was very good about being flexible, being adaptable, caring and compassionate. But if certain things hit below a certain standard, like you would know, and you would have to then kind of reset yourself and make sure that you're not getting complacent and making sure that you're on top of it. And so having that compassion and care with an extreme bit of competitive edge. And then I think a lot of that though also comes on the recruiting side. Like you really have to find, talent is really important, no question. But I think that having that competitive edge, you have to have, like, and I think that's harder and harder to find with kids these days and soccer players, because it's like you see all the flash and all the excitement and all the skill and all the talent, but you don't see the work that they took to get there, and the failures and the challenges, maybe their backgrounds that they've had to fight through to get to where they are. And so I think that's something that is so important, to try to find someone that has struggled, that knows what some struggle and adversity is, so that when they have that, they're more liable to just put their head down and keep working and keep getting better. So that's important.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think everyone, you look on Instagram or you look on Snapchat or you look at TikTok, and you see all the skills, all the good bit. But I think with Ronaldo, for example, Rio Ferdinand came out in an interview a couple of years ago and said he was terrible at shooting and he was embarrassed by it. So every day he used to take a bag of footballs, go to the far end of the training ground so no one could see him, because he was embarrassed by himself, and would work until he got better. Then he did that for the entire off season, came back the following year and scored however many goals it was. And I think that, understanding that actually the effort that goes into being high performance, regardless of what aspect of your life is, the first port of call is working hard with it. There's very few things in life that come easily. Very few things that come just by snapping your fingers. Actually, it takes effort to, write a song, or it takes effort to run a marathon, or it takes effort to write an academic paper. But that's your number one starting point, and then everything else will follow.
Yeah, no question. You nailed it. And and so that's so important to try to find, because I think you really can't fake it. You're gonna know what you have when that moment comes of challenge, and that's why it's so important to try to find that and then cultivate that, and then when you do have those challenges, optimize the learning and opportunity of it.
Perfect. So, Kylie, I'm going to ask you one more question, which is something I ask everyone, which is, who is the best player or coach you've worked with or against, and why?
Oh, best player or coach. So, wow, that's a best player or coach. I would say the best player I ever played with was one of my teammates at Creighton University. Richard Mulrooney was his name. He's now the head coach of University of Memphis. And he ended up having a very good MLS career, had some caps with the men's national team as well, too. And he was just so balanced, such a good player on both sides of the ball, and relentlessly competitive, but a good guy. And, I think, not a fancy name maybe, but like also incredibly talented as well too. So I would say him, direct player. I would say coach, man, that's a good one. I would say I'll give you three. I mean, I think like just Bobby Clark, the longtime coach from Notre Dame, Stanford, Dartmouth before that, and he had spent some time in New Zealand. I don't know. Do you know that name?
In passing, yeah.
Okay, yeah. He even, I think he played with or for Sir Alex at Aberdeen way back, because he's old, he's retired now and older, but had the opportunity to work a lot of his camps at Notre Dame, coach against him many times, and so him, I think, one of his kind of proteges, I would say, Brian Weiss, who's now at Georgetown University and has done phenomenal there, and won a national championship in 2019. And then the last one, I'd say Jeremy Gunn, who I've coached against, who's at Stanford now, and we have one of his former assistants on my staff, Charles Rodriguez, and so been able to maybe steal some of the Jeremy Gunn model in some ways.
Perfect. I'm actually hoping to get Jeremy on soon. We're currently in talks, so it sounds like there would be a really interesting one to have a discussion with. And
he's as good as it gets.
Perfect. Listen, Kylie, really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. I mean, we haven't even touched on any of the football philosophy side, a lot around the environment, but I think a fascinating insight into what you guys are doing there and how you've gone around sculpting a program, etc. So really appreciate your time, and hopefully we could do this again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Speak to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.